Hi everyone and welcome to my Hydra Sword Guide for Season 9. This is a brand new build that just got introduced thanks to a new unique item, the Ophidian Iris Amulet, that mega buffs your Hydras and gives you those gigantic Hydra heads depending on how many you would normally spawn. So they all combine into much bigger, much more powerful Hydras. And there's also some other reworks like the Serpentine aspect that is core to this build. So I want to show you what it's all about. But overall, this is a really good, solid, all-rounder build that you can play. It finally shakes up the SORC meta. Lightning Spear has been nerfed and now we have some new stuff in its place. And I think it's going to be quite exciting. So this build can kind of do it all pretty well. It is pretty high ranked, pretty powerful from what we can tell ahead of time. And on the PTR, it was definitely performing really well. And it's smooth as butter to play. Most of the time, it's basically just teleport, cast a Hydra, teleport, cast another Hydra. So it's pretty relaxing playstyle, especially in the late game when you actually have all of the tools in place. But across the board, it's just a pretty low APM, not very complicated playstyle, I would say, outside of like very try-hard pit push setups potentially. So besides the Hydra, the teleport, or at least teleport enchant, and the Inferno, you can actually build this setup in various ways. There's a lot of text choices you can make. In my case, for example, I also like to have another teleport on my bar, so I can do double teleports just to go a bit faster sometimes, which just felt really nice and fluid. But you don't have to do that. You can also throw in Ice Blades, you can throw in Familiar, and so on. So there's a bunch of options here in order to like maybe go a little bit more on the offensive side or a little bit more on the quality of life side. And I mostly went for the quality of life. But either way, Hydra is going to end up pretty strong. So as I mentioned earlier, we have it here. So top of 8 here, maybe it's even gonna like sneak in here up there on the S. We'll see exactly where it'll land. There were some pretty significant reworks and updates from the PTR to the live server, so we don't know exactly where everything will land. And here's also Northwards Hydra guide, so you can also follow, for example, the starter progression, Ancestral, Mythic, and so on. And if you go, for example, to our leveling tier list, we also have a brand new Hydra SORC leveling setup here made by Panda Glassjaw. And with that being said, let's jump into the setup here and see what this is all about. So I already mentioned the Ophidian Iris. This is kind of a must-have for at least the late game, but you can also get started with the Hydra earlier. But it is kind of a huge damage buff that you want to acquire as soon as possible at least. And then we have the Serpentine aspect. This aspect is so strong that you really want to put it on a two-handed weapon. So the way this works is that you cast Hydra, you lose all your mana, and then you try to regenerate it back, which luckily is pretty easy to do because we have Primordial Binding. So Primordial Binding is a passive designed for summon SORCs. And in this case, we have Hydra summons. We can also have Ice Blades, Familiars, or for example, what I have here, which just makes it super comfy from the start, the Nagu Sei combo for your runes, which gives you those Spirit Wolves, and they also count for Primordial Binding. So it's very easy to get those 10 stacks, and you really want to have them because this passive scales to the moon. Not only do you have a few ranks here, but the buffed Ophidian Iris from the patch also has more of those ranks, so we can get a lot of ranks here. So they replaced Devouring Blaze with Primordial Binding here, which is not on the planner right now. And this is actually pretty cracked when you try to master that up as well. Because of the Serpentine aspect, we also try to stack more maximum resources, and in this case, we end up with Axial Conduit. This might sound a little bit weird, but it does have this affix here for extra resource generation and maximum, and this can go to almost 90%. So this effectively becomes something like a 60-70% damage multiplier or so when you actually fill your resources and then use Serpentine aspect. Another kind of key part of the setup is the extra Hydra heads. So we have this as a temper here on the weapon. You can have up to 12, and you really want to try to masterwork this 3 times as well if you can. It's kind of tough to do on a legendary item, but maybe try to go for at least a double, so you have 10 plus heads, because this goes into the Ophidian Iris as well. So there's this effect here. For each head above 3, you get this 100% extra damage effect. So it scales pretty high. And most of the remaining pieces here are just there for general utility or power. So Tarasha is a SORC staple, is very strong. It has cooldown reduction, which we want. So this, for example, enables us to spam our Inferno a little bit more easily. We also have Inferno cooldown reduction tempers. So for example, before you acquire all those uniques, you want to just temper Inferno cooldown probably, just so you can spam that a bunch, because it gives you this great 50% damage buff, for example, applies vulnerable for you. So it's really powerful utility. And we can also get a lot of cooldown from the Harlequin Crest. So this will obviously take a while to acquire, but before that, it's still fine. So for example, if you have the Ancestor variant here, you can just put a normal helm, you can get Orange Herald on that thing as well, which is a pretty useful legendary aspect here to reset your ultimate, for example, so you can spam your Inferno relatively solidly all the time from almost the start. And you can also put, for example, more Inferno cooldown on other slots. But Harlequin Crest is just a very powerful SORC item for late game scaling, just thanks to that cooldown reduction. You try to get as much of that as possible, because you can face roll all of your cooldowns, and you can then teleport around all the time. So you can get to the point where every cast you do resets your teleport enchantment. And then with the boots here, with the 1.5 seconds evade cooldown reduction, you can cast anything, evade, cast anything, evade, teleport, and you are just flying through those maps. As I mentioned, you can make some adjustments on your skill tree a little bit, or on the skills that you use here. So for example, you can also run with a flame shield if you like that, if you feel like you might need that, if you want to survive a bit better against lair bosses, for example. It's gonna make some fights pretty comfy. Then you can also just run that instead of, for example, the firewall. I have the firewall here because you can throw it on the boss, you burn them a bit faster, which is also nice. But if you feel like you don't need that extra damage, then you can do this. Then we have the Hydra enchant here. So this is something that's a bit of a question mark, but I am optimistic at least that this is going to help us. So there is a very good chance that the Serpentine aspect will not actually synergize with the Hydra enchant, because you will spend all of the resources at once, triggering the extra free Hydra from the enchant, and then that may or may not be buffed by the Serpentine aspect when that happens in the same moment. So we'll have to test and see, but for now it still does some contribution basically. Most importantly because we have the Paragon bought the Enchantment Master here. So this gives us a 40% damage buff for having any fire skill slotted. So you can also go with other fire skills. So for example, Familiar works, or you can do Firewall Enchant as well. So you can just trigger that for free. So this is another option here if you want to, for example, throw another skill in your bar. But I went with this now and hope it works. Otherwise, I might change this. And while we're on the topic of Paragons, it looks like this here. So the key legendary nodes that we want here are the Enchantment Master, as I have mentioned. So you want to try to combine this with at least one fire skill slotted, and usually the other one is Teleport. Then we have the Elemental Summoner. This is a pretty big buff, 60% here for our conjurations. We have Burning Instinct, also really powerful for burning builds, which this one is. So there is the version where you could play with crit and try to scale direct damage on the Hydra, but that is going to be much weaker than scaling burning damage. There's just better synergies. You have a better key passive. You have this here, which is very powerful. So there's a bunch of effects that make burn pretty strong compared to crit. And lastly, we have Fundamental Release here. Another 40% multi, 50% actually. So pretty strong as well. The glyphs are mostly just there for generic damage buffs. So Flame Feeder does that. Torch for burning builds is very powerful. Pyromaniac, kind of the same story. Tactician here, you want to make sure that you press one of your defensive skills every so often. And one glyph I want to point out in particular is Unleash. So this one is a little bit weaker in terms of actual damage output, but it's not bad. And also pretty point efficient, but also gives you a nice 25% mana regeneration rate. So I really like Unleash. And for example, if you're struggling a little bit early on, you can also try to slot this in on one of the earlier boards when you're just leveling up. And this is one of the first glyphs or so. Just throw it in there, for example, and this 25% mana regen will help you a great deal. If you want to see some progression steps, I also have them here. So for example, Paragon 200, Paragon 250, and then all the points. So you can go through that and you can find exactly, what you're looking for, see the steps, and it's also going to help you to progress with this. But yeah, this is pretty much the entire setup. So there are some more little details here, but you can see the planner. It's mostly just, stack life in wherever you can after you fix your armor and res. So very early on, you might not be automatically capped with your resistances, for example, but as a SORC, most of the time you don't have to worry about those in late game. You just kind of get res capped by default. You get a bunch of armor here as well, and especially with the Harlequin crest, it's going to be very easy to cap the armor later. Or when you have a normal helm, you can also put armor there or maybe on another slot. And that concludes this guide here, so hope you enjoyed this. I wish you good luck in Season 9. Again, check out the Hydra guides here, the leveling and the endgame version as well if you want to learn more. I'll link those down in the description together with my planner here. And, well, hope you like this video. See you guys next time.